They descended from the sky in burning streaks of silver, their warships blotting out the sun over Earth's greatest cities. The Galactic Dominion, a coalition of 100 species, had convened in their grand halls, and with one unanimous vote, they decided that humanity would no longer govern itself. They had done this before, world after world, system after system, bringing order to the chaotic, unpredictable lower races. Earth was no different. It was another unruly civilization in need of correction. They arrived in numbers too vast to count, wielding weapons that could reduce mountains to dust. Humanity's satellites were torn from the sky within the first few minutes. Our defense networks were shattered before they could even mobilize. Then came the ground assault, merciless, calculated, precise. The Dominion soldiers moved with the efficiency of a machine, slaughtering resistance forces with cold detachment. It wasn't a war. It was an extermination. Elias Cade watched the fall of Earth from a battlefield drenched in human blood. He was a soldier, a survivor, a man forged in combat. He had seen war, but never like this. The Dominion's forces were relentless, advancing like a tidal wave of death, indifferent to the suffering they inflicted. He had been stationed in New London when the sky opened up and the city burned. Fighter jets streaked through the air, firing everything they had, but the Dominion warships moved with eerie precision, swatting them from the sky like insects. Cade had fought, alongside his unit, alongside men and women who refused to bow. They had held the line for 3 days before they were overrun. He remembered the chaos, the screams, the explosions, the bodies piling up in the streets. He remembered his commander's last words before their barricade was breached. Never surrender. But surrender wasn't a choice. The Dominion didn't take prisoners. They took slaves. Cade was one of the unlucky ones, dragged from the ruins of his fallen city, shackled in cold metal, and thrown into a transport ship. He had never felt powerless before, not like this. Not when he had spent his life fighting, bleeding, winning. But here, surrounded by Dominion soldiers, their alien eyes devoid of empathy, he realized what they saw him as. Not a man. Not a warrior. An animal. A creature to be broken, bent, and molded into a tool for their empire. They transported him and thousands of others across the stars, into the heart of the Dominion's war machine. Some were sent to the labor camps, massive industrial planets where human hands would fuel their factories. Others were sent into the entertainment arenas, forced to fight for the amusement of their overlords. Cade was taken somewhere worse. He was to be trained. Not as a Dominion soldier, but as a hunter. A tool to track down and crush human resistance across the empire. They wanted to turn him against his own kind. They thought they could break him, like they had done to so many others. But Cade wasn't like the others. He didn't fight for survival. He fought for revenge. They trained him in their weapons, their tactics, their technologies. They taught him how to navigate their ships, how to read their battle strategies, how to anticipate their every move. They thought they were molding him into an instrument of their will. Instead, they were handing him the keys to their destruction. Cade watched. He learned. He waited. Every Dominion officer who stood before him believed he was nothing more than another broken human, another slave stripped of his will. None of them saw the fire in his eyes. None of them saw what was coming. Then came the moment he had been waiting for. The Dominion was transporting a new batch of slaves, fresh from the latest conquered system. Cade was on the ship, standing alongside his captors, pretending to be the obedient tool they thought he was. But he wasn't alone. He had spent months whispering in the dark, spreading words of rebellion among the humans who had lost everything. He had planted the seeds. Now, it was time to ignite the fire. The moment the ship entered hyperspace, Cade struck. The guards never saw it coming. 1 second, they were watching their human cargo with detached boredom. The next, Cade had his hands around a Dominion officer's throat, crushing the life from him before he could scream. The others reached for their weapons, but the humans around them, once silent, once beaten, exploded into action. It was chaos. Beautiful, brutal chaos. The Dominion's disciplined ranks crumbled under the sheer fury of a species that refused to be caged. Cade led them through the corridors, tearing through the ship's security forces, turning the vessel's own weapons against their captors. They stormed the bridge. The Dominion commander stood there, staring at Cade with something between fear and disbelief. "You think you can win?" the alien rasped. "You are a disease. A virus that will be eradicated." Cade's fist connected with the creature's face before it could say another word. "Wrong," he growled. "We're the cure." Within minutes, the ship was theirs. The first stolen Dominion warship, piloted by human hands. The first crack in the foundation of the Empire. Cade stood on the bridge, surrounded by men and women who had nothing left but vengeance in their hearts. The ship's systems flickered before him, a wealth of knowledge, a pathway to every Dominion stronghold. He turned to the others. "This is just the beginning." And with those words, humanity's counterattack began. The Dominion never saw it coming. A single warship, stolen by human hands, tearing through their controlled space like a ghost. The ship was no longer theirs, it had been reborn under Cade's command, its systems rewritten, its weapons turned against the very empire that had built it. They thought they had enslaved humanity. They had only given them the tools for their own destruction. The ship, now named Vengeance, became a beacon, a whispered legend among the scattered remnants of humanity. It drifted through the darkness, striking where the Dominion least expected, hitting supply lines, freeing prisoners, turning entire slave planets into human strongholds. The Dominion responded with overwhelming force. Every engagement was supposed to be their final victory. And yet, every time, the Vengeance escaped, leaving nothing behind but burning wreckage and a message carved into the ruins: "You are prey now." Cade didn't just fight them. He hunted them. Every Dominion officer, every warlord, every governor who had set foot on Earth was marked. He tracked them through their own networks, using Dominion encryption against them, hacking into their systems with human ingenuity they had never accounted for. One by one, they vanished. Some were taken in the dead of night, dragged from their fortresses screaming into the void. Others found themselves surrounded by human insurgents in places they had once ruled without fear. And when Cade struck, he made sure the Dominion knew exactly who was responsible. He sent transmissions, their own channels hijacked, their leaders forced to watch as their highest-ranking officials pleaded for mercy before being silenced forever. Panic spread through the Dominion. They had conquered thousands of worlds, broken countless civilizations, and yet this one species, this one planet, was undoing them piece by piece. Reports flooded their command centers. Entire fleets had gone dark. Human forces were taking ships faster than they could replace them. Dominion cities, once thriving under their rule, were suddenly crumbling under human uprisings. Entire Dominion species who had once voted to enslave Earth now begged for their own worlds to be spared. Cade had expected resistance. He had expected the Dominion to adapt, to send their most elite hunters after him. And they did. But they failed to understand the fundamental difference between them and humans. The Dominion fought for control. Humans fought because they had nothing left to lose. When the Dominion finally located the Vengeance, they sent an entire armada to eliminate it. 50 warships. A force that could annihilate entire planets. They cornered Cade's stolen vessel in the debris field of a shattered moon, surrounding him on all sides, preparing for what they believed would be the final kill. Cade stood on the bridge, watching as the Dominion admiral's image flickered onto his screen. The creature sneered at him with alien arrogance. "You have caused enough damage, human. Your kind are vermin, spreading chaos wherever you go. Your war is over." Cade leaned forward, a slow grin stretching across his face. "Over?" He gestured at the data feeds scrolling across his screen, intercepted Dominion transmissions flooding in. "See, here's the thing about humans. You thought we were contained." He turned, looking at the crew of survivors he had gathered, soldiers, engineers, hackers, former slaves, all watching him with unwavering trust. "You thought you were hunting me. But you never realized," he activated a command. Across the Dominion's fleet, ships started going dark. Their weapons failed, their engines shut down, their navigational systems reversed their friend-foe recognition. The Dominion admiral's face twisted in confusion and horror. "What? You weren't hunting me." Cade's voice was almost amused. "I was hunting you." The Vengeance's cannons roared. The Dominion's fleet collapsed in on itself. Their ships, unable to tell friend from enemy, fired on each other in pure chaos. Some detonated in chain reactions, others rammed into their own allies, desperate to regain control. Cade and his crew weaved through the destruction, targeting the survivors, boarding the crippled warships, executing every single Dominion officer who had ever set foot on Earth. By the time it was over, not a single Dominion ship remained. Cade stood over the body of the admiral, his boot pressing down on the alien's throat as it gasped its final breaths. The creature's eyes, once filled with arrogance, now overflowed with fear. "You should have killed us all when you had the chance," Cade murmured. And then, without hesitation, he ended it. The message was sent. Humanity wasn't just resisting. Humanity was winning. The Dominion was bleeding. Every system, every supply route, every fortress they had once deemed unbreakable was now a battleground. Their once mighty fleets were in retreat, their warlords in hiding, their empire fracturing under the relentless assault of a species they had believed was beneath them. Humans weren't just surviving. They were winning. The message had spread like wildfire, across labor camps, among enslaved populations, through whispers in the dark. Humanity had taken their chains and forged weapons from them. And leading them was the name that Dominion officials now feared to speak. Elias Cade. The butcher of the Dominion. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He had become an idea, a symbol that even the most broken among them could still rise. Across every captured world, human insurgents carried his message: we do not kneel. We do not break. We do not forgive. The Dominion had once paraded their power, believing their rule was eternal. Now, their skies burned with the wreckage of their own ships, their cities fell to uprisings they could no longer control, and their armies, once confident and overwhelming, were deserting in fear of the inevitable. They had tried to contain him. The Dominion's greatest tacticians had drawn lines across the stars, laying traps, setting ambushes, sending entire legions to hunt him down. But they didn't understand what they were dealing with. They didn't understand humans. Where the Dominion fought with strategy and numbers, Cade fought with rage and precision. Where the Dominion relied on overwhelming power, Cade exploited every weakness. He never attacked where they expected. He never fought on their terms. And most importantly, he never lost. The Dominion had assumed that enslaving humans would be the end of them. Instead, it had unleashed something they could not stop. Cade led his forces with calculated brutality, showing no mercy to those who had once laughed as Earth burned. He made them feel everything they had inflicted, and then some. Entire Dominion strongholds surrendered the moment they heard his fleet was near, their commanders abandoning their posts, their soldiers throwing down their weapons rather than face what was coming for them. The Galactic Council, once composed of the Dominion's most powerful rulers, now sat in their fortified chambers, voices trembling as they argued amongst themselves. They had never lost a war. They had never faced an enemy like this. Every Dominion species had cast their vote to enslave humanity. And now, every single one of them was begging for a way out. Cade gave them none. He didn't just want to win. He wanted them to understand. He wanted them to feel the helplessness humanity had endured. He wanted them to burn. When the Dominion finally sent their Supreme Chancellor forward to negotiate, Cade let the transmission play across every Dominion system. He let their people hear their highest leader pleading. "We can offer peace. We can offer reparations. We did not know." "You knew exactly what you were doing," Cade interrupted, voice like steel. "You looked at us and saw slaves. You saw a resource to exploit. And now, when you finally understand what we are, you want peace?" He leaned closer, and across the galaxy, Dominion citizens heard his next words as if whispered into their very souls. There is no peace. The transmission cut. Cade's fleet advanced. The Dominion fell. The Supreme Chancellor's plea echoed through every Dominion-controlled system, but it wasn't met with sympathy. It was met with silence. Then came the laughter. Not from the Dominion. From humans. Across battlefields, in stolen ships, in once enslaved colonies that now flew the human banner, the message spread like wildfire. The mighty Dominion, the rulers of 100 species, the architects of a galactic empire that had lasted for thousands of years, were begging. It was the kind of irony that left men grinning in the midst of war, the kind of moment that seared itself into history. But Elias Cade wasn't laughing. His eyes were cold, his hands steady as he stood before his officers aboard the Vengeance, the flagship of a fleet that had once been their captor's pride and was now the instrument of their execution. He replayed the transmission again, letting the words hang in the air before he finally spoke. "They want peace," he murmured, voice almost amused. "Peace wasn't an option when they burned Earth. Peace wasn't an option when they took our people in chains. And now, when they're on their knees, when they've run out of moves." He turned, letting his gaze sweep across the room. "Now they think they get to negotiate?" Silence. Not hesitation, not uncertainty, just the anticipation of what was coming next. They already knew his answer. They had seen too much, bled too much, lost too much to ever consider mercy. Cade leaned forward, his voice steel-edged. "We end this. No more retreats, no more hiding, no more waiting for them to catch up. We strike their core worlds, their command centers, their leaders. We bring them to ruin." No one objected. They had followed him from the ashes of Earth to the burning remains of Dominion-held space. They had watched him dismantle the very foundations of the enemy's empire, piece by piece, until fear of humanity was stronger than fear of their own rulers. And now, they would watch him finish it. The fleet moved as one, warships stolen from their oppressors now flying the banner of the very species they had sought to enslave. Dominion patrols fell without resistance. Even the once unbreakable defensive lines surrounding their inner systems crumbled at the first sign of human vessels. Their soldiers no longer fought for survival. They ran. Cade never let them escape. The Galactic Council's fortress world, the last bastion of Dominion rule, was surrounded within hours. Thousands of warships, millions of soldiers, all amassed for what should have been an impossible siege. But the Dominion's last great fleet, their last desperate stand, never fired a shot. They surrendered before the first human vessel arrived. Cade stood in the heart of their grand chamber, his boots echoing against the polished floors where these rulers had once stood above all others, delivering their decrees with unquestioned authority. Now, they cowered, their robes stained with sweat, their expressions twisted with fear. The Supreme Chancellor stepped forward, his voice trembling. "This war, it does not have to end in annihilation." Cade met his gaze without blinking. "You misunderstand. It already has. There were no more negotiations. The Dominion ceased to exist. Its leaders were executed. Its planets liberated. The species that had voted for humanity's enslavement now knelt before their new rulers, and those that refused? Their worlds burned as Earth's once had. Elias Cade did not build an empire. He did not claim a throne. He did not name himself conqueror. He simply left one last message before the fleet vanished into the void, before humanity faded into the echoes of history as something far greater than rulers, far greater than conquerors. A warning. If you ever come for Earth again, you won't get the chance to beg. The Dominion had ruled for centuries, but in the end, they crumbled in weeks. It wasn't just the destruction of their fleets, the burning of their strongholds, or the executions of their leaders. It was the fear. The realization that they had miscalculated on a scale no empire had ever survived. They had believed humanity was weak, that their will could be broken, that they would fall in line like every species before them. Instead, humanity had spread like wildfire, consuming everything in its path, turning Dominion weapons against them, turning their own systems into tools of rebellion. The last remnants of their military had collapsed the moment the fleet arrived at the heart of their empire, their soldiers laying down arms before the first shot was even fired. The Galactic Council's desperate plea had gone unanswered. There was no mercy left to give. Elias Cade stood amidst the ruins of their once great palace, watching as the last of their rulers were dragged forward, stripped of the grandeur they had once wrapped themselves in. The Supreme Chancellor, once the most powerful being in the galaxy, trembled on his knees before the man he had once deemed an insignificant slave species. "This is genocide," he rasped, voice barely above a whisper. "You've already won. Why wipe us out?" Cade's expression remained unreadable. "Because we remember," he said simply. "We remember the screams when your ships darken our skies. We remember the bodies in the streets, the ones you left to rot as a warning. We remember our people taken, beaten, used, discarded like they were nothing. And you? You thought you were gods." He crouched in front of the Chancellor, tilting his head slightly. "But you are just monsters with better weapons. And I'm here to remind you what happens to monsters." The Chancellor tried to stand, but Cade didn't let him. A single shot rang through the chamber, echoing through the ruins. The last leader of the Dominion collapsed, his lifeless body joining those who had fallen before him. It wasn't vengeance. It wasn't justice. It was the end. The humans who had fought, who had bled, who had survived, stood in silence. The war was over, the enemy eradicated, but there was no celebration, no victory speeches. This wasn't about conquest. This wasn't about power. This was about never letting history repeat itself. Cade turned to the assembled forces, his voice cutting through the silence. "We don't rule," he said. "We don't build empires. We don't become what they were. We leave behind a lesson." He gestured around them, at the shattered remains of the Dominion's once unbreakable walls. "Anyone who comes for Earth will see this. And they will understand what happens next." The fleet left Dominion space, vanishing into the stars. They didn't claim territory. They didn't plant flags. They simply disappeared, leaving behind a galaxy that would forever fear the name of humanity. And when new species rose, when new civilizations expanded, when whispers of war and conquest stirred once more, they all remembered the warning carved into the ruins of what was once the most powerful empire in the known universe. Never again.